Hey guys, Julian here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make cosmic techno like Victor Ruiz. As usual, you can get the full project file and samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video right at the top of the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. And yeah, let's get started. So we're at 128 BPM. The first sound here is this beep, which sounds like this. So this is just the sound you can hear, it's playing on the 2 and 4. It just hits like this steady one note that plays throughout the whole track, and you can just hear like it gives you something really steady because you're constantly just expecting this to come in. And yeah, it's just sitting really nicely in the track. So as far as the note this is playing, it's just A sharp. We're in the key of A sharp minor, so usually this would just play the root note. And yeah, so for the sound with this one, it's made with operator. This is actually a really simple FM sound. You can see it's literally just a sine wave, and then I brought another sine wave in that's an octave up, and then just turn that up a little bit. And that's how you get the sound. It's not that complicated. I've heard this in a few of Victor's tracks, and I believe this is how you make it. You can also probably make this with a square wave or with pulse waves. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but this is a really simple way to get this kind of just like little bloop, where it's not a sine wave, but it's like very close, but it still has a lot of nice harmonic content to it. And then for effects on that, we just have a bit of reverb and drum bus. And yeah, that's it for that. After that, we have the lead. So here are the notes on this one. You can see, like I said, we're in the key of A sharp, so A sharp minor specifically. So if you look at this, you can see there are a lot of notes here, at least in terms of how many notes are playing, but it's not really that many notes because there are really just notes inside of this A sharp minor scale. So you can see we have A sharp, C sharp, which is the minor third, F, which would be the fifth, another A sharp, another C. So, excuse me, actually, yeah, so then we have C, which would be the ninth, we have another A sharp, another C, another C sharp, and then finally a D sharp, which would be the fourth. So, it's just kind of finding notes in the scale that are going to work for this, essentially. It's really just more about writing a lot of notes than it is knowing some crazy different scale, Again, this is just a straightforward minor scale. It's just the way that we're using it that makes it sound so interesting. And the thing here to keep in mind also is the way these two little passages talk to each other. Because if you listen, the first time these top notes are sort of walking up. We go C, C sharp, D sharp. And then the second time, it goes D sharp, C sharp, C. So it's kind of like that little sort of conversation you can have, the call and response thing. Just thinking like that instead of just having something that just plays the exact same thing every single time. But yeah, and then for the sound on this one, this is made with analogs. So we have two saw waves here. They're an octave apart. I've also got a little bit of white noise as well. And then I just have the low pass, which is actually not really doing anything, but it is on technically. Then I have the amp envelope set like this. And then finally, we just have a bit of vibrato and a bit of unison. You can see it's not really a whole lot of unison. But yeah, this is, how you make one of these kinds of leads. I think a lot of people think you have to do all this crazy stuff to make it sound good. But typically, actually, I find that these leads sound better if you just get a good saw wave or two saw waves in this case and just let it breathe. Put a little bit of saturation like I do have on here and a few small effects, but it's not really a whole lot of stuff that you want to do. And especially inside of the synth, it's really just more about having those two nice saw waves together with the noise and how fat that can sound rather than a bunch of crazy stuff to get it to sound like this really nice saw lead like you hear. Really, it just comes down to the fact of knowing how to let a synth breathe and sound good on its own. But yeah, so after that, just have a little bit of echo. You can see it's not a whole lot, but I have that on the ping pong setting. I've also got a little bit of reverb on that. Then I just have some saturation, so I'll show you. Here's without the saturation, and then with it. So like I said, we're just taking this nice sound coming out of the synth, saturation, just to beef it up a little bit. And then there you go, that's what it's doing. And then finally, I just have a high pass filter here, as well as this EQ. I'll show these at the same time because they're really just both EQ. But yeah, we're just cutting out a little bit of low end. You don't want to cut out too much, because you see how there's still a lot of stuff happening around like there? You know, you still want to let that like shine through. We just want to make sure we cut out all the like low end so it doesn't get in the way of the bass. And yeah, and then I have this high end boost as well with the EQ. So that's just to bring out a little bit more of the sharp highs, because sometimes when you do have a sound like this, it can get a little bit muddy. And an easy way to solve that is just to bring out the highs a little bit more. But yeah, and then the only other thing there is just this compressor side chaining this to the cake. You can hear that. And yeah, that's it for the lead. And then we have this little atmosphere. So this is actually just like the beep. It's just playing that one note, just the A sharp. And yeah, so we just have that playing that one long held out note there, and then this is just adding that. Just sort of like one extra little musical background element, essentially, because without this, it just feels like it's missing something. And yeah, like when we're getting to here, I'd love to be hearing at least just like one note in the background. And yeah, so that's the purpose of this. It's just to kind of add that sort of like musical atmosphere, so to speak. And so for the sound with this one, it's just this long sound. I'll show you the original. Yeah, you can hear, you know, it's just this sort of like voice sample type of thing. I brought it into a simpler here, and then what we're doing is I have this loop mode on. So when you turn this on, it makes it so that it makes an endless loop so that this won't just end at some point. Like if you don't loop it, it's going to just end, and then it's going to sound, you know, it's going to kind of give up the sound. Like it's going to be weird. So this loop makes it so it'll play as long as you hold down a note. And then the other thing here is the fade. So if you turn up the start and length, you'll notice that the fade isn't doing anything. But then if we start to turn this up, see how the fade comes in? You turn up the fade knob, and then you turn the start and length time up and down. And there you go, that's how you do it. And that creates just like this endless loop, so that, you know, if you don't do this, a lot of times like you'll hear sort of like some clicking. You can hear that little that happens there. Like, it's subtle, but it just sounds kind of weird in the track. So the fade makes it so it'll loop really smoothly. And yeah, then we just have a bit of chorus as well as a bit of reverb. Those are just giving the sound some space and some more stereo width. Then I have this drum bus just to give it a little bit of fatness. Even though this isn't the type of sound you would normally think as like a really fat sound, you still want to try to make it sound really full, and that's what the saturation is doing. And then finally, I just have a compressor, which is side chaining into the kick. And yeah, that's it for the Atmos. Then we have the kick. So this kick is 3 layers. We have the kick, the rumble, and then this click sound, which is part of the kick, and I'll show you what I mean with that. So the first thing would be just the main kick. So this is, you can hear just like this really fat, punchy kick sample. And I just have it going through a bit of drum bus. And the main thing to notice with this one that I picked up on from listening to these tracks is like, you just really want to make sure it's equally deep as it is fat, like, and punchy. Like, a lot of techno kicks have the k down and don't have as much like really deep low end. It's, you know, like a lot of times the balance is a little bit sort of in favor of the punch of the kick. This is a kick where you really need to make sure you're choosing a sample that has equal amount of punch and like just warm low end in it, as you can hear. And so that's what we did here. I pitched the kick down a little bit, as you can see. And then I just kept going through a bit of drum bus. And yeah, that's really it. You know, if you have a good kick sample, that's really all you need. Then we have the rumble. So what this is, it's the same kick that you just saw. You can see I pitched it down. And then what's happening here is I have this pattern where it's like ba-doo-doo, boom, ba-doo, doo, ba-doo-doo. And yeah, so it's a really easy way to make a rumble. It's kind of the best way in my opinion, because you can really like play with the rhythm of the rumble. That's something I noticed with these tracks is like it's not just about having like that but it's about how it's like like that little nuance in there I think is really going to make a big difference. And that's why I like doing it this way, is because you can change the velocities of the individual notes. But yeah, and then so what I did here is I have that kick and then I just bandpassed it. And then you hear, if you just focus that on the low end, there we go, we get just this nice deep low end note, and then you have the bass. And then I just have a bit of drum bass on that, just kind of beefing it up. I also sidechain into the kick. That's pretty important when you make these kinds of kicks, like, or these kind of rumbles. You know, you got to make sure that you sidechain it, because you want it to fit under the kick. And yeah, that's it for the rumble. And then the last one here is this little click. So this is actually made using the same exact kick, and then this one is also going through a bandpass filter, but then you can see the bandpass on this one is just a bit higher. And then I've got some drum bass, and I also have this one being sidechained as well. So yeah, this is just meant to be part of, you know, like, you hear this in the beginning of a ton of different techno tracks, like, just that, like, sort of extra background element almost. You know, creating this kick groove, essentially. Like, it's not just the kick, it's not just about, like, just the kick that's going doom, doom, doom. The kick, to me, in terms of this type of track, is the kick, the rumble, and then sort of like the groove that's going on top of that. And that's what this is doing. And you can hear it's also playing really nicely off of the rhythm of the rumble. So yeah, just like a nice element to have in there. This is going to sound really good in the intro of your track especially. And yeah, then after that, I have all these in a group, just with a bit of saturation and EQ to kind of tighten them up and glue it all together to sound like one kick. Again, we don't want to think of this as like the kick and the bass and a percussion element. We want to think of them as one thing that we're trying to just make one really tight, cohesive element. So here is without this stuff. And with it, and you can see, you know, it's not like we needed to do too much stuff. It's just doing a little bit, but this little bit that it's doing goes a long way. The saturator here is what really glues it all together. Like, having multiple things going into saturation like this, just sonically kind of pushes them together. Like, a really good example of this is if I just turn this way up. Hear how it just kind of becomes like a big wash of sound, essentially. It all just becomes one sound. So we're doing that effect on a much smaller scale, where it'll just glue them together without like actually, you know, crunching them together like that. And then we just have this EQ8 after that, which is just a little bit of a low end boost, just to make it a bit stronger in the low end. And yeah, then we have the hi-hats. So the first thing here would be like this main hi-hat that's playing on the upbeats. So this is two layers. We have this one, you know, more of like the body of the sound, and then we have this one, which is adding the punch of the sound. You can hear this is a lot shorter, and then this one is just sort of like, and if we play either one of these on their own, it's like this one doesn't have as much body to it, and this one doesn't have as much punch. So then you put them together and you get the best of both worlds. So that is how we did that. The main thing to keep in mind here is just like how much energy is put into making this hi-hat fat. Like, I feel like this needs to really be equal with the fatness of the kick. Like, if I just play this with the kick, you know, it shouldn't be like boom, like a little tiny hi-hat like that. It needs to be boom, boom. The hi-hat needs to be equally as punchy as the kick, or else that whole dynamic isn't even going to work. Then after that, we have this shaker and tambourine. So you can hear these are just the two things that are playing the 16th notes in here. And yeah, I selected these and layered them together based on like where they fit into the mix. The shaker is very much in the mid-range. So this is giving us, just like I was saying with the last hi-hat, sort of like the body. And then the tambourine just has a lot of nice kind of jingly high ends. So then that is giving us that like sort of stuff in the highs. And then you put them together, and they fit really nicely, and you get this really like fat, powerful. Like, you can really hear that and feel it cutting through the mix, giving all that energy to the mix. And yeah, and then the last one in here is just this ride. And this is just your standard sort of techno 909 ride. I've just got this being high pass, you can see, to cut out the lows. And then I just echo on here on the ping pong setting. And this is a good technique. A lot of times in these tracks, you need your ride to be like a bit wider. Like if I turn this off and play it in the mix, and then I'll turn it on. Here, like when you have that wide ride, it's just that like last little thing to really make it fit nicely into the track and give the track some depth, because now these other hi-hats are sitting down the middle for the most part, and we have the ride in the left and the right ear. So you're getting a little bit more presence for the ride and a little bit more space for it in the mix, just based off like how it's fitting in stereo-wise. And yeah, and then on the group of hi-hats, we just have a bit of drum bus and EQ. So here is without anything. And then with the drum bus. And then with the EQ. So you can hear the drum bus just fattens everything up, you know, really brings these out and makes them powerful. And then the EQ is just cleaning it up, cutting out some lows, boosting some highs as well to make it a bit sharper. And yeah, and then the last thing that we have down here are these little sort of like background percussion elements, which actually just come in the second half. Like if you see like these first two bars where the lead is playing, you don't really have any of these, but then they come like that. So yeah, these are just to kind of fill up that space a little bit in the part where there is no lead. This is something that's important to keep in mind. Like you don't really want to just have it like just kind of riding like that. Even if you have a part like that that is just kind of riding out with like everything just kind of moving along, you need to have some little things that are coming in and out like this. Because you can hear just how much more energetic and exciting the track is when you have these happening versus when, you know, you let people just listen to like your main elements just kind of riding out. So yeah, and it's not that hard to do. All these are, it's just this little like noise. Just some white noise with a high pass filter, that's it. And then these two percussions. So all those are these like rim shot sort of sounds. And then I've just pitched them down a bunch. And then you just get like some cool kind of techno percussion. But again, you can just hear like what these are adding and how they make the track a lot more interesting and just more exciting when they're happening. You know, you really want to make sure that you pay attention to like every moment of the track and not just having like, you know, your loops play out essentially, because it can be tempting to do that, but this is the stuff that's really going to separate like an okay track from an amazing track. So yeah, and then on the group of these, we just have a bit of drum bus and a high pass filter. Here's without it. And then with it. So you can hear the drum bus is actually pretty important for these because it really does make these hit hard and make them really powerful and full in the mix. And then I just have the high pass after that to cut out the lows and make sure that nothing is going to be clashing with the kick or the bass or anything like that. And yeah, so that is me for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video, as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the full project file and samples and MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video is available right at the top of the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. And yeah, thank you so much, guys. I appreciate all the support lately. You guys have really been loving the videos, and it means a lot. And I will see you guys tomorrow with another video.